Let's be honest, we are all drowning in data, right? It's just growing exponentially, and trying to keep it safe, compliant, and cost-effective, man, it can feel absolutely impossible. So the big question is, how do we finally get from all that chaos to some real control?
Well, what if your data could actually protect and manage itself? I mean, really think about that for a second. That's the core idea we're going to dig into today. We're talking about a framework that can turn simple storage into a smart, self-governing system. But first, let's really understand the problems we're trying to solve here.
Okay, so let's talk about what I'm calling the modern data dilemma. And look, it doesn't matter if you're a massive enterprise or a tiny startup. These challenges, they are universal. This is the chaos that pretty much all of us are trying to wrangle. I mean, we've all been there, right? That heart-stopping moment when someone accidentally deletes a critical file. Or even worse, you get hit with a ransomware attack that holds your data hostage. And all this is happening while your storage costs are just spiraling out of control and regulators are breathing down your neck about compliance. Yeah, these are definitely the kinds of problems that keep people up at night. All right, so how do we fight back? Let's build our first layer of defense. And I want you to think of this first one as a time machine for your files. Seriously, it's a fundamental safety net that protects us from some of our biggest headaches.
So what is this magical time machine? It's called S3 versioning. And by just flipping it on, you're basically giving your system one simple but incredibly powerful command: never truly delete anything. Instead, every time you update a file, or even delete it, it just creates a new version, neatly preserving all the old ones right there with it.
Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? Let's say you save a report. Cool. Later on, you save an updated version of that same report. Now, instead of just overwriting the original, the system keeps both. And here's the kicker. What happens when you hit delete? It doesn't actually erase the data. Nope, it just puts this little delete marker on it, leaving the actual file completely safe and totally recoverable. And this seemingly simple feature, it has incredible real-world value. It becomes your escape hatch for those accidental deletions. It's your recovery point if data gets corrupted. You can even use it to roll back an entire application to a previous state. It's such a simple concept, but the implications are seriously powerful. Okay, so we have our time machine. Now let's move to the next layer of our strategy. Think of this one like building an unbreakable vault or a fortress around your most critical information. This is for the data that you absolutely, positively cannot allow to be touched. This next layer is called object lock, and its whole job is to make your data immutable. What does that mean? It means it's set in stone, it's unchangeable. For a period of time that you define, that object simply cannot be modified or deleted by anyone, period. But you've got options here, which is pretty cool. First, there's governance mode. This is where specific, authorized users can't override the lock if they really need to, perfect for flexible internal policies. But then, there's compliance mode, and this one is absolute. I mean it. No one, not even the root user, the highest level administrator, can touch that data until the lock expires.
Now, the really crucial point here is that this feature creates what's known in the industry as write once, read many, or worm-compliant storage. This is the absolute gold standard that's required for things like legal evidence, financial trading logs, or super-sensitive medical records. We're talking about a level of immutability that can stand up to the toughest regulatory scrutiny.
Okay, so our data is now protected with a time machine and locked down in a vault. That's awesome. But what about efficiency? What about the cost of all this? Well, now it's time to introduce a kind of personal butler for your data, one that manages its entire journey automatically. And this butler has a name: Lifecycle rules. It's a classic set it and forget it kind of deal. You define the policy just once, and the system handles everything else. It works tirelessly in the background, moving data as it ages to cheaper storage tiers, and then, finally, deleting it when it's no longer needed.
So let's look at a real-world example to see how this plays out. Picture a file. On day 0, it's created and lives in standard, frequently accessed storage. But after 30 days of nobody touching it, poof, it automatically moves to a cheaper tier. After a year, it gets archived into even cheaper long-term storage. And then, say, after 7 years, because that's our policy, it's permanently deleted. And the best part? All of this happens without a single human ever having to click a button. And you have an incredible amount of control over these data journeys. You can create super specific rules to move data from a hot tier for stuff you need all the time
to a warm tier for things you access less often, and finally to a cold archival tier for data you just need to keep around. It's all about perfectly balancing your costs with how quickly you need to access that data.
All right, now for the final and honestly maybe the most impressive layer of them all. Because what happens when you don't know how your data is going to be accessed? This is where the system gets a brain of its own.
I want you to meet S3 intelligent tiering. The best way to think about this is like a self-driving car, but for your storage costs. It is constantly watching the access patterns for every single file. If a file isn't being used, it moves it to a cheaper tier automatically. But, and this is key, if that same file suddenly becomes popular again, it zips it right back to the high-performance tier, all in real time.
This is an absolute game changer for any data with unpredictable access patterns. You know, things like user-generated content, big data analytics, log files, stuff you might need at a moment's notice, or maybe not for months. Intelligent tiering just completely removes all the guesswork and the headache of managing it all manually.
Okay, so let's pull back for a second and look at the big picture. We haven't just been talking about a few cool, separate features. We've actually been building something much, much bigger.
Let's tie it all together. We started with versioning, and that gave us recoverability. Then we added object lock for bulletproof immutability. We used lifecycle rules for set it and forget it automation. And we topped it all off with intelligent tiering for cost optimization. You see how each one of these pieces serves a critical interlocking function? And that right there brings us to the key takeaway of this whole thing. When you combine all these tools, you're no longer just using a simple storage service. It stops being just a place to dump files. It becomes a dynamic, self-managing data governance platform that is actively protecting, managing, and optimizing your data for you.
So I'm going to leave you with this one final thought to chew on. As your data inevitably continues to grow, both in sheer volume and in importance, what's the real cost in risk, in dollars, and in compliance headaches of doing nothing?